Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. The US Federal Reserve Chairman has indicated that interest rate cuts are on the horizon. In a speech at Jackson Hole Economic Symposium, Jerome Powell acknowledged that US inflation has cooled enough to begin the rate cut. However, there are still fears that a recession could be triggered as employment rises. Nick Harper gets us more from Washington.
Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, has made his most definitive remarks to date to indicate that interest rates are coming. It now very much seems to be a case of when rather than if. He gave no precise timing of when that rate-cutting cycle would begin and no precise details of the size of the initial cut.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. Overall, the economy continues to grow at a solid pace, but the inflation and labor market data show an evolving situation. The upside risks to inflation have diminished, and the downside risks to employment have increased. As we highlighted in our last FOMC statement, we are attentive to the risks to both sides of our dual mandate.
There was one small caveat as to the exact timing and pace of those cuts, saying that it would depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. However, global markets don't like to be surprised by interest rate rises or cuts, and this seems to be the Fed chair very much trying to lay the groundwork to signal that these cuts will be coming. Now remember, the Federal Reserve here in the US implemented a very aggressive rate hiking policy, 13 rate hikes between March 2022 and July 2023, all of it to try and get inflation under control after it hit a 40-year high, topping 7%. Now, interest rates were raised to 5.25 to 5.5%. They've been there for more than a year. That is a 23-year high for interest rates, something that has certainly had an impact on the US economy. Part of that has been, of course, the calming of inflation. That has cooled. It's now down to about 2.5% from that above 7% high. But an unintended consequence is also that we've seen the labour market tighten as well. Increased interest rates mean that companies are often more reluctant to hire workers. So we have seen the unemployment rate rise, and that has risen concerns in recent weeks that the US could still be on course for a recession at some point in the next 12 months. The Fed chair, Jerome Powell, thinks that is unlikely. He was indicating that he feels that the US is still on course for a soft landing as opposed to a hard landing and recession. All eyes will now be on the next Fed meeting, which takes place on the 17th and 18th of September, when we could finally see that long-awaited interest rate cut finally happening. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.